Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio. And now, here is Walter Bingham.
Hello and welcome to the program for July 24th, 2021, which in the Hebrew calendar is the 26th of the month of Elul 5781. I am Walter Bingham, and today you will hear another packed program of items that caught my attention during the past 2 weeks. But I want to begin with a short thought about what I believe will have a major effect on the peace of the world. It is neither about Iran nor about the Middle East. It concerns the policy of US President Joe Biden and his inexcusable, irresponsible, sudden, total withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan, contrary to the phased plan prepared by President Trump. Biden was quick to accuse the Afghan army to be unwilling to fight for their country. Yet research by Brown University estimates losses in the Afghan security forces at 69,000. It is interesting to note that the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military, Joe Biden, never ever served in any military capacity. He managed to receive 5 student draft deferments. So much for his knowledge of military strategy. Biden's immediate action of abandoning the brave Afghan army sends a clear signal to China, Russia, and North Korea that he cannot be relied upon to stand by the commitments given by previous U.S. administrations. This capitulation creates a sense of insecurity among the populations of Taiwan, the Ukraine, and even South Korea, areas that are in the crosshairs of the 3 dictatorship powers. They have made no secret that they are intent to return those areas to their mainland. Biden's action has brought that possibility one step closer. In this program, we discuss in detail the divisive and irresponsible statements by Knesset member Miri Regev of Yesh Atid, who wants to replace the whites in the high echelons of Israel's administration with a Sephardi elite. You will hear Israel's response to Poland's disgraceful anti-restitution law that leaves Polish Jews without redress for their losses and caused a diplomatic rift between our two countries. Such anti-Semitism is increasing exponentially all over the world and brings into sharp focus that only Israel is the safe haven for all Jews. Back with more after this.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
And now, here is Walter Bingham.
Anti-Semitism is increasing exponentially all over the world and brings into sharp focus that only Israel is the safe haven for all Jews. The differences of COVID prevention between the general US population and the massive numbers of illegal immigrants as operated by the Biden government is another subject we talk about in this program. In a more light-hearted mood, I talk about taking up flying as a sport and what that involves. Resulting from the rotation of the Earth and the Gulf Stream across the Atlantic Ocean, the wind direction in the Northern Hemisphere is predominantly from west to east. That's why aircraft take less time when flying from America to Israel than flying westerly into wind. As if also helped by the wind, the concept of fast food was blown across the Atlantic, bringing KFC, McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, and many more such establishments into our lives. We learned to live with them and even adapted to the lifestyle they virtually imposed on us to such an extent that their products are copied and even available under kosher supervision. There are also various noises like punk rock, rap and other styles masquerading as music, the louder the better, to which those of us are frequently exposed who were brought up in traditional style, where songs were melodic and lyrics were clearly discernible. All those are still bearable cultural imports from the New World. But the wind does not distinguish between acceptable and unwelcome arrivals. It seems that one of the latest imports from the US that made it across at lightning speed is their critical race theory, adapted into Israeli style by member of Knesset Miri Regev of the Likud party. Apparently, because she is of Sephardi origin, she carries a chip on her shoulder. She believes that the color of our citizens' skin determines their destiny, that it is white privilege that dominates our government and by implication the highest positions in the land. It is important to demonstrate that Regev's parentage and darker-than-white skin tone had no detrimental or retarding effect on her own career. During a long service in the Israel Defense Forces spanning 25 years, Regev rose to the rank of Brigadier General. She served in a variety of professional and command roles, including Chief Military Censor for the Press and Media and IDF spokesperson, both in the realm of national security. Miri Regev also served as National Head of IDF Information Dissemination in the Prime Minister's office in preparation for the Second Gulf War in 2002. In 2009, she was voted a member of Knesset, serving among others as Chair of the Internal Affairs and Environment Committee and member of the Finance Committee, the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, and of the House Committee. Since 2017, Regev was acting Prime Minister on the occasions of Netanyahu's absence abroad. So, her criticism of discrimination based on being Sephardi and of darker skin color is nothing but a political tool to garner support among the Sephardi right-wing voters to be able to fulfill her ambition to become leader of the Likud after Netanyahu. In the year 2021, there are hardly any Sephardic Jews in senior positions. Then she exclaimed, "Something is very wrong here. It's time we had a Sephardic Prime Minister, and I definitely see myself as leadership material." She knows full well that to stand for that position in any primaries is the right of every member of the Likud party, regardless of color, religion or background. It is the membership that decides whom they believe is best suited to lead the party into an election. Regev expressed her frustration that too few of the senior members of her own party are Jews of Sephardi origin whose parents came from Middle Eastern or North African countries. Do these sentiments sound familiar in American BLM terms? Miri Regev described to Yediot Achronot her plans for a golden revolution to lead a new type of elite to power that will emerge from Sephardic ranks. She believes that changes would begin to be felt as early as next year. Then she wrote, "I would like to be heading an alliance of leading Sephardic Jews by 2022 or 23. Likud members should be selecting people from their own circles to represent them because," and then she asked everyone to listen carefully to what I'm saying, "if the present Likud continues to opt for people with white DNA, a different type of Likud is liable to appear on the scene, a genuine Sephardic Likud that will give voice to Sephardic views that haven't been expressed by anyone in the past, and this has to change." So decreed Miri Regev. She has certainly taken a leaf out of the mission statement of Black Lives Matter. Yet in May 2012, at a demonstration against illegal immigrants in Tel Aviv, Regev said that, and I quote, "Sudanese infiltrators are a cancer in the nation's body." Her inconsistent assertions reek of the hypocrisy of a power-crazed woman. Let's examine her allegations. The Internet lists 49 names of prominent former and present politicians and high-ranking military officers, all of Sephardi background, including President Katsav, Moshe Kachlon, Shaul Mofaz, Dalia Itzik, Gabi Ashkenazi, Gabi Eisenkot and others. That does not look like discrimination. Miri Regev's public pronouncements are divisive and designed to create a Sephardi elite to the exclusion of other Jews. She is a danger to the progress of creating a cohesive and inclusive society. While talking about American influence, we see that there are events in Israel showing that we are not alone in the confusing way in which our government is combating the COVID-19 pandemic, resulting in almost weekly changes in the regulations. Looking at the US, we see a similar pattern applied to the general population. As in Israel, the citizens, with few exceptions, are compliant with government instructions simply because they either don't understand the immunological details or because they are liable to be fined. The US administration believes that by strict enforcement of the regulations, the pandemic can be beaten or at best contained. They do have, however, one rule for their own population and quite another for the masses of illegal immigrants who are allowed to enter the United States almost freely across the Mexican border. On arrival, they are temporarily confined in holding facilities in border towns before being shipped by the busload into the interior of the country. A huge burden on the American taxpayer. Border police report that about 40% are infected with COVID. At no time during the proceedings are they being treated, so that they are able to infect not only each other, but the US population into which they are being dispersed. It is inconceivable that while the residents of the country are being subjected to stringent health regulations in an effort to halt the infections, thousands with unknown medical history are almost encouraged to enter the US. The Trump administration achieved a border policy that brought illegal crossings to a trickle, and those who entered were processed and in most cases returned to Mexico or even their country of origin. Trump also initiated the Remain in Mexico policy while their applications are being processed. So what is the rationale of the Biden government for reversing the previous administration's regulations to keep the US free from illegal mass immigration and the embedded criminals, gang members, drug traffickers and prostitutes, as well as militant Muslim elements? While you ponder this question, let me posit another one, the effect of which adds to the reason why the United States is fast losing its leadership of the free world. To work and produce is a basic rule for any country's economic well-being. During the periods of lockdown when stores were closed and staff was laid off, the unemployment benefit regulations were changed, and to this day, when stores have again reopened and work is available, the unemployment benefit continues to be paid. Today in the US, There are 8.7 million registered unemployed, while business owners are crying out for staff and competing with additional inducements to attract workers. Why is the Biden administration continuing to pay high benefits for not working, causing the economy to suffer heavy losses not only by the financial burden on the Treasury, but the loss of business and commerce because of staff shortages? Back after the break.
Hi, I'm Steve Miller.
And I'm Matt Zucker.
Join us for Lighten Up, where we take a look at the week's current events in Israel and from around the Jewish world through a humorous lens.
If you've been paying attention during these crazy times, you know that it's a challenge to parody life anymore. But join Steve and I as we give it the old college try. Not only is being happy an obligation, but life is just too short to take it all so seriously.
So join me, Steve Miller.
And me, Matt Zucker.
For Lighten Up every Monday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Israel, only on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
And now, here is Walter Bingham.
Welcome back. Why is Biden's administration continuing to pay high benefits for not working, causing the economy to suffer heavy losses not only by the financial burden on the Treasury, but the loss of business and commerce because of staff shortages? As if that were not enough, employers will now have to insist on any prospective employee to be vaccinated, which reduces the small, willing labor market even more. For 20 years, successive American administrations have been engaged in nation building, not in their own country, where until a decade ago there was relative normality among the several ethnic groups comprising the US, but which has now disintegrated. But that's a subject for another time. It's Afghanistan that has been the focus of their noble efforts. That troubled country has been the breeding ground for militant Muslim extremist groups who believe that the teachings of their Prophet Muhammad must replace the various decadent systems that obtain all over the world. As we have experienced, they employ the most cruel methods designed to instill fear into their target population to enforce compliance. It was on Christmas Day 1979 when, in an expansionist move, the Soviet Union mounted a massive invasion of Afghanistan. They soon encountered fierce resistance by guerrilla attacks from the Mujahideen, who came down from the mountains and then disappeared again. They proclaimed a holy war to gain support from Muslim nations. It was a method without pitched battles for which the Soviets were not prepared. The United States saw an opportunity to weaken the Soviet Union and supplied weapons to the fighters. 15,000 Soviet soldiers were killed. With no victory in sight, humiliated, and with a damaged economy, the Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev decided to pull out. After 10 fruitless years, in February 1989, the last Soviet troops left. The Soviet adventure into Afghanistan was recognized as a costly mistake. Instead of drawing a lesson from the Russian defeat, the Americans, who believed themselves invincible, decided to avenge the attack on the Twin Towers in New York on September 11, 2001, and eliminate the terror group Al-Qaeda and their leader Osama bin Laden. Their struggle to oust fanatic Muslim terrorism and install a democratic system of government in this Muslim country lasted 20 years, until the Americans and their ally, the United Kingdom, believed that the Afghan army that they trained could now maintain peace and keep the Taliban at bay without their backup. The plan of the Trump administration was a phased withdrawal, leaving safeguards for the Afghan population and an agreement with the Taliban, should they return to power, that they will prevent the activities of Al-Qaeda. Trump claimed that Biden, quote, ran out of Afghanistan instead of following the plan our administration left for him, a plan that protected our people and our property and ensured the Taliban would never dream of taking our embassy or providing a base for new attacks against America. The withdrawal would be guided by facts on the ground, Trump said in a statement. After I took out ISIS, I established a credible deterrent, and that deterrent is now gone. The Taliban no longer fears or respects America or American power, he added. The Wall Street Journal wrote, quote, Mr. Biden's hell-bent, ill-planned withdrawal from Afghanistan is turning into a strategic defeat and a moral debacle. In the meantime, a total of 2,312 U.S. military personnel in Afghanistan have been killed and 20,066 have been wounded since 2001. A moral disaster of wasted sacrifice. The cost of military operations is put at $824 billion, and now we are back to square one. Only time will tell what will become of Afghanistan and its tormented population. You have probably heard about Poland's disgraceful action. The Poles, and I am deliberately generalizing, have once again demonstrated their age-old antisemitism. Before the Holocaust, 10% of the total population of Poland were Jews, more than anywhere else in Europe. Their possessions and property had been appropriated by succeeding Polish governments since the end of World War II. It is true that the bulk of the atrocities in Poland during the Holocaust has been perpetrated by Germans while occupying their country, that the concentration camps on Polish soil were erected by the Nazis, and that the murder of almost 3.3 million Jews who lived in Poland before the war was carried out on the instructions of the Nazis. Only 380,000 survived. All that could, however, not have been accomplished without the cooperation of the Polish authorities and their population. Not all Polish Jews were instantly recognized by their appearance and attire. It was the local authority registration that facilitated the arrests with the cooperation of the population. Properties owned by Jews and forcefully vacated were allocated to Poles. Following the end of the war, the communist regime completed the crime by confiscating Jewish-owned commercial properties and factories. These are now operated by Poles. Poland is the only post-communist EU country not to have passed a property restitution law. The outrageous statement by Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki to categorically refuse to pay compensation. Not a single zloty, dollar or euro, he said, amounts to theft of Jewish property, not different from the actions of the Nazis in Europe. To add insult to injury, the Polish lower house legislated a 30-year limit for restitution claims against the state to be in effect retroactive from a date that caused it to be already expired. Poland's president, Andrzej Duda, in a final disgraceful act, has now signed all this into law. He blames false claims against Polish citizens that made people rich for taking this step. By this wicked action, today's leaders of the Republic of Poland have aided and abetted the theft of Jewish property and absolved those Poles from their legal guilt who are benefiting from the illegal possession of properties that belong to the heirs of murdered Jews. But from their moral and ethical guilt, they can never be absolved. Knesset member Yore Lahav Herzanu of Yesh Atid said in an interview with the Jerusalem Press Club, Poland's attempt to rewrite history and to prevent taking responsibility for the crimes that its citizens have committed is a disgrace. And Prime Minister Naftali Bennett released this statement about Poland's action. Israel views with utmost gravity the approval of the law that prevents Jews from receiving compensation for property that was stolen from them during the Holocaust and regrets the fact that Poland has chosen to continue harming those who have lost everything. This is a shameful decision, disgraceful contempt for the memory of the Holocaust. This is a grave step to which Israel cannot remain indifferent. There is at present no Israeli ambassador to Poland, so Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has recalled our chargé d'affaires at the embassy in Warsaw for indefinite consultations. A new ambassador to Warsaw will not be sent at this stage, Lapid said. He also suggested Poland's ambassador to Israel extend his vacation and not return to Israel. These are grave and significant steps in diplomatic protocol that are never taken lightly. Poland has once again shown its age-old institutional anti-Semitism. It is a systematic attempt to eliminate Jews from Polish memory. In fact, Poles imbibe anti-Semitism with a mother's milk. At the turn of the 19th century, thousands fled the pogroms that were carried out against Jews in Poland. Both my father and mother fled as children with their parents, and to my best knowledge and belief, I may still also hold Polish citizenship. If so, not for very much longer, because I intend to hand it back in disgust. Even after the Holocaust, when Jews returned to Poland to try and retrieve their property, they were set upon by residents of their former homes.
Are you tired of political correctness and the fear that you might offend someone?
I'm not afraid to offend you.
Wow, look who's talking tough.
One has to be tough to keep sane today.
Hi, I'm Alan Skorsky.
And I'm Bayla Seabrow.
And join us every Wednesday for The Definitive Wrap as we interview the most sought-after guests and expose progressive trends that masquerade as enlightenment but actually destroy our freedoms.
We are the No Woke Zone, so buckle up to this exciting show.
Buckling up, but I'm driving.
Sure, you can drive, but I'm the navigator.
Tune in for the No Nonsense, The Definitive Wrap Show, every Wednesday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Even after the Holocaust, when Jews returned to Poland to try and retrieve their property, they were set upon by residents of their former homes. The most infamous of those attacks was the Kielce pogrom, a violent massacre of Jews in the southeastern Polish town of Kielce on the 4th of July 1946, when a mob of Polish soldiers, police officers and civilians murdered at least 42 Jews and injured over 40. If that could happen in peacetime, just imagine the freedom of action for Poles during the Nazi era. Estimates varied to between 295,000 and 500,000 of Poles who volunteered to serve in the German army. So let none believe that the Polish population were blameless of the murder of their Jews and those who were sent to concentration camps in Poland. I would be remiss if I would not mention the Polish families who accepted small Jewish children that were handed to them by their parents prior to their deportation to be cared for until the parents will again return. They never did. And several hundred Jewish children, if not thousands, were brought up as devout Catholics, unaware of their Jewish parentage. It was not until on the deathbed of the adopted parents that many of them confessed the truth to those children, by now adults. Several of them were ordained Catholic priests. Some others grew up as anti-Semites. Their known traumatic experiences are too harrowing to describe here. This is one more point that should weigh heavily on Polish conscience. It's not only Poland where anti-Semitism is rampant. The whole world is infected not only by the COVID-19, but by this age-old and proved phenomenon that is being blamed for all the problems, political, economic, and even demographic, with which the overpopulated and underfed world is struggling. Everything is being manipulated by Jews to the detriment of ordinary people. That's why Jews must be banished from the face of the earth. Since 1948 and the establishment of the State of Israel in our ancient homeland, it is no longer an option to attempt state-sponsored violence against our people. Our defense forces will go to the furthest corners of the world to prevent such action, as they did in the famous rescue at Entebbe Airport. Israel is an extraordinary country. Here, unlike in the so-called civilized world, it doesn't matter where Jews come from, Tunisia, Turkestan or Timbuktu. Yes, there really is such a place, it's in India. Or whatever the color of the skin, despite the attempts at elitism by Miri Regev, discussed earlier in this program. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew, and everybody here goes out of their way to welcome you, whoever you are. It doesn't matter if you are Torah observant or secular. Talking about secular, with intermarriage in the USA reported to be running at 70% and other parts in the world not far behind, you owe it to your children and grandchildren and the generations that hopefully follow you to bring them into a Jewish environment by making Aliyah. If you think that I'm preaching, then just remember how unhappy some of your friends, or certainly Jewish acquaintances, are because their offspring married out. But I ask you, what can you expect if you don't show them a Jewish way of life? Like the huge billboards on American highways proclaim, people who pray together, stay together. And Israel is the best place for that. Contrary to what is being said in the diaspora, this is no longer the country of push and shove and sharp elbows. Our people are friendly and helpful, and the experiences of our circumstances have molded Israelis into a compassionate society. If you live alone, there is always someone who will extend an invitation to join their Shabbat table. If you have scant knowledge of Hebrew and try to shop in a supermarket, you can approach most of the shoppers who speak English, and they will spend time to assist you. Could you imagine this in your city? When I ask the way in New York, they don't even stop walking, and before I completed my request, I hear, "Sorry, but got no time." I am not saying that we don't have rude people here. The security situation makes everyone a little edgy, but impolite people are now the exception rather than the norm. Life is good here. But look what you've got. Muslim extremism, exponentially increasing anti-Semitism, manifested by frequent cemetery desecrations, daubing of Nazi slogans, attacks on Jews and synagogues. Believe me, you can do no better than to come home to live among your own people in your own country, while you still have the freedom to do it leisurely and in your own time. Don't delay as we did in the 30s. I'm sure that when you come, you'll find me, as some others have done, to tell me, Walter, you were right, it was the best thing I ever did. I, for my part, very much look forward to meet you. Making Aliyah means literally going up to Jerusalem. Now let's talk about going up and away. Why not escape the traffic and be free like a bird? Put away those golf clubs. Hang up those hiking boots. If you really want to reach for the sky with a leisure activity, why not take up flying? There is no high like it. Excuse the pun. I can tell you from experience. Of course, if you were to suggest to someone to take up flying, or that it's your interest, you could see the blood draining from their face. Flying other than as a passenger in a commercial plane is strictly for the birds, or at best for millionaires in their private jets, they'll tell you. How wrong they are. There are many Jewish men and women having the time of their life looking down from about 2,000 or 3,000 feet on the would-be holidaymakers getting frustrated in traffic jams and their little children getting restless and frequently asking, are we there yet? While they, in their small planes, are on their way to an airfield by the Dead Sea or Eilat or Rosh Pinah or Cyprus. One day, even Abu Dhabi may become a destination for the private flyer with Saudi overflight permission and suitably spaced refueling facilities in Saudi. Of course, there are a few Israelis who own expensive machines, but the vast majority of private pilots are ordinary folk in ordinary jobs. They range from doctors to accountants and secretaries to shopkeepers. You will even find Air Force or commercial pilots who have retired and who find it hard to get flying out of their system. Once qualified for a basic PPL, that's the private pilot's license, you may want to join a group of between 4 and 10 or even more members who co-own a 4-seat light plane like a Cessna 172 or a Piper Cherokee or similar, and one member takes care of the bookings. Each pay a reasonable monthly charge to cover the cost of incidentals like insurance and the parking fee at home base. The group also agrees on an hourly rate while in the air to take care of fuel, mandatory maintenance, and engine depreciation. The single most expensive investment is the training for the license. Israel has several flight training schools, and I met up with Yossi, the chief flying instructor of the FNA Flight Training School, which is situated at Herzliya Airport, just north of Tel Aviv, and to find out what private flying in Israel looks like today, and also what it takes to qualify, and very importantly, what it costs. Yours is one of the larger flight training schools in Israel, and I know that there are different levels of private pilot qualifications. So what do you teach?
The school can teach everything that you can get in Israel: private pilot license, CPL, instrument ratings, night ratings, and multi-engine.
Is Herzliya the only airport where one can learn to fly?
We also have another school in Haifa.
If someone makes a decision to learn to fly, what's involved and how does one start?
The first step is to introduce the first flight, to see if he likes it. He needs to see how it is. Many people think that they want it very much, and after the first flight they decide that it's not for them. Somebody is scared, somebody doesn't feel so well, and many people just getting first flight for present. They didn't even think about such a thing to do. But after the first flight, they want to keep on it.
When you say the first flight, you mean somebody comes to the flight school and straight away they can go in an aeroplane?
Yeah. We're doing quick briefing before the first flight, and we let the people fly from the first flight. No problem at all. It's not taking off, it's not landing.
How long does the training take?
It depends how you want to do it. Some people doesn't have enough time to do it, so they come once a month, once a week. It depends. And some people want to do it very quickly, and they have enough time to do it every day. So some people can do the whole license in about 3-4 months, and some people it takes them more than 2 years.
Is such a big gap between the lessons advisable? They'll forget.
Yeah, it's a big problem. If you're doing the lessons every week, every lesson, you can keep moving on the syllabus. But if you don't fly about 1 or 2 months, you forget, as you say, and you need to repeat again and again the same.
Does one have to learn much theory before the in-flight lessons? And is one then allowed to handle the controls?
Yeah, you're getting enough briefing before the flight so you can control. You need to learn the theory as well, but you not have to do it before it. You can do it at the same time.
But what about taking off and landing? That's tricky, isn't it?
Taking off, it's not tricky. Most of the people after the second or the third lesson can do it. Landing, it's tricky.
On what kind of plane does one learn at your school?
Most of the students here learning on the Cessna 152 or 172. We also have Tecnam and the Diamond for a multi-engine.
Does a student stay with the same instructor?
Most of the time, the same instructor for the same license. Some people take instructor for the PPL, and then after for the instrument take another instructor, but most of them stick with the same one.
The international aviation language is English. Is knowing English a part of the licensing condition?
In Israel, you must know Hebrew to get a license, but some of the exams are in English, so you need to know English. Like radio telephone, you must know English before you're getting the license.
Who conducts the final examination?
There are examiners from the civilian authority. The civilian authority has their own examiners.
Once the first license is issued, to what does it entitle?
You're allowed to fly a single-engine plane for 5,500 kilo.
So a newly qualified pilot can fly any small single-engined aeroplane below that weight.
Yeah.
In Israel, we are fortunate to have mainly clear and sunny days. But what if there suddenly develops low cloud en route?
It depends about the amount of clouds. Sometimes you can fly above the clouds as long as it's not more than half of the sky. As long as you see the ground, you're not allowed to fly inside the clouds in PPL unless you have instrument rating, and then you can fly.
What about taking passengers? And is there a geographical restriction where he can fly? Could he, for instance, go to Cyprus?
You're allowed to take passengers. You're not allowed to take money for them if you just have a private pilot license.
Can the holder of a foreign license rent a plane and fly freely in Israel, or are there restrictions?
No, he's not allowed to rent a plane. He's allowed to come with his plane from aboard and to fly with somebody here to show him the way, or just to get to international airport in Israel. Otherwise, he's not allowed.
What is required now to upgrade a foreign license to a full Israeli one?
It depends which one you have. The most easy one is from the United States. So you need to do all exams. And then you just need to have flights with an instructor that will say that you're good enough. And then you're going to final exam with examiner from the civilian authority.
But one has to know Hebrew.
Yes, you must have.
Finally, what does it cost to get a basic license to fly a small single-engine plane?
This is the $1 million question. It really depends about the student. If I need to tell you one number, I would say 80,000 shekel for the PPL.
How much is one flight hour?
1 hour cost 1,090 shekel, plus instructor, another 350 shekel.
That was the chief flying instructor, Yossi Schechter, of the FNA Flight Training School at Herzliya Airport. I am now being shown around the inside of a two-seater Cessna 152, and the instruments in front of me, even for this training plane, are bewildering. There are about 10 dials of different sizes, levers to pull and push, as well as a lot of switches. No wonder it takes many hours to master the skill. If you want to learn how to see the world from above, contact FNA Flight Training School from Israel at 09 957 7717. That's 09 957 7717. And mention this program. For the more enterprising, there are many good training establishments in the USA, particularly Florida, which have training packages, including accommodation and sometimes even a car. So you can have a holiday and return with a pilot's license. However, as you heard, if you live in Israel, there is a drawback. To be allowed to rent and fly an Israel-registered plane requires you to do some more theoretical studies and a flying test, which can take an hour or two, depending on how you perform. Once you've passed and want to rent a plane somewhere else, you'll find that it's definitely not like renting a car by just showing the license. Prospective renters will need to be checked out to demonstrate their flying skill, and that can take up to an hour in the air at hourly cost. The highest stage is an instrument rating that qualifies the holder to fly only on instruments without visual reference, in clouds, at night, within international airways and under air traffic control. For that, a suitably equipped aircraft is necessary, and then the world is your oyster. To tell a personal story, I did have an instrument rating for a twin-engine light aircraft, and in 1971 I flew a sophisticated single-engined aircraft solo from England to Israel and back to London. While in Israel, I experienced the second most emotional moments of my life when I circled about 200 meters over Jerusalem, seeing the whole city below me and trying to control the aircraft while tears ran down my cheeks. It happened to be one of those afternoons when Jerusalem looked golden and the sun illuminated the Judean mountains. An amusing exchange with military air traffic control happened on my onward flight to Eilat that afternoon, when military air traffic control warned me not to mistake the lights of the almost twin city of Aqaba in Jordan for my destination. Well, my trusted Beechcraft Bonanza and I made it safely back to Gatwick Airport in the UK. And with that adventure story, I end this program and hope that you found something of interest among the items I brought you. If you have any comments, suggestions, or even criticism, please write to me at walter@israelnewstalkradio.com, where you will always get my personal reply. So, until next time, this is Walter Bingham, wishing you a good week, a meaningful one in this month of Elul, and while we are still in the midst of the COVID pandemic, it's very important that you visit your elderly neighbor to see if they are all right, because loneliness kills. Goodbye.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.